welcome to this first Eden NAP webinar of 2025. I'm very pleased to give you a title for today's session, which is Empowering Teaching Excellence through the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, Developing SoTL Communities of Practice. My name is Fiona Aiken. I'm a senior lecturer and a staff tutor with the Open University in the UK in the School of Environment, Earth and Ecosystem Sciences. And I have a couple of my colleagues here today who are going to also be running this session. First of all, I've got Diane Butler, who is a professor of STEM education in the School of Life, Health and Chemical Sciences at the Open University UK. And Diane has an academic background in life sciences, and her current research interests are on supporting academics to develop skills in the scholarship of teaching and learning and issues of diversity and inclusion in STEM teaching. She's a co-academic lead for academic promotions at the Open University and a past director of STEAM, which is the STEM Faculty's Centre for Scholarship and Innovation in past. And I have another colleague with me as well, who's also going to be contributing to the session. That's Trevor Collins. And Trevor is a research fellow at the Open University's Knowledge Media Institute. And his research interests are in the design and use of technology to enhance teaching and learning. He's the director of the Open STEM Labs, which supports practical and practice-based learning at a distance. And he's a past director of STEAM, the STEM Faculty's Centre for Scholarship and Innovation. So I'm now going to hand over to Trevor, who's going to start the session for us. Thanks, Trevor.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Fiona. Oh, good. I'll just double check that I can be heard there, folks. Let us know in the chat if there's any issues. Hopefully we're all good. Brilliant. So as Fiona introduced us there, today's session will look around ways in which scholarship can be used to improve teaching. Hopefully it's of interest to those of you that come along today. We're all from the Open University based in the United Kingdom, but we've been looking at this and talking about it with other colleagues from other institutions around the ways in which institutions can support scholarship as an activity and the kind of impact that has on culture of an institution. So today it'd be great to discuss that kind of stuff with you. So do use the text chat, please. Let's make it as interactive as we possibly can. I can see they're starting to add in the places that these are coming from here. So this is really, really helpful for us because it's good for us to make these interactive, make it as much of a conversation as we can. But as I say, we've got a particular view around this, and it's certainly one that we're interested in your feedback on, and also interested in ways in which scholarship is supported in the institutions that you're at as well. So there's certainly lots of support around. The idea through sharing this kind of work and reflecting on the support that's available, it helps us maybe improve what we do at our university, and also maybe share ideas with yourselves and get suggestions from yourselves as well. So I think that's the goals for this session. What we're going to do as well today, if you are able to, if you can use your phone there for the QR code, or if you've got a web browser handy, maybe go to the Mentimeter site for us there and type in the number. We'd just like you to use, the text chat and also Mentimeter as a way to get a bit of interaction going. So I think the first of these Mentimeter things today is just checking out whereabouts where you're from. So quite a few of you have already added that into the text chat, which is great. And I'll maybe have a quick look there on the website to see if folks have responded to the Mentimeter one as well here. So let's see. I'm just checking if I can drop a pin in there in the UK. Oh, I may not hit that myself. That's roughly what it is. There's a few people, hopefully, maybe the UK, maybe Central Europe.
There's a few people popping in now. It's great. Welcome, everybody.
The text chat is actually a better granularity than that, so we might draw from the two, but it gives a good sense, folks, to see where people are from. These little Mentimeter things, if you find them useful, I think through the presentation today, we've got a few places where we'll pause and get responses to these things. Too small to vote on the phone. Irina, you're right there on the text chat. I found the interface for the map not so good. Hopefully the other things will be easier, folks. There's a few text-based ones that'll be easy for the phones. Okay, anyway, a little bit of interaction. Let's do the overview. We're going to really with an introduction and kind of describe a little bit around our approach for the scholarship at teaching and learning, and just position the piece a little bit and talk about what we do at the Open University in the UK. We'll look at and share with you some of the ways in which we're supporting the scholarship of teaching and learning, either at the faculty level. So in our case, we're based in the science, technology, engineering, and maths faculty. But no matter what your discipline is, it's sort of thinking about the structures within your institution. So we'll say a little bit about the faculty support. That's what Diane and myself, Fiona, have got direct experience from. Fiona will speak about the school support that she runs in her school, and then Diane will come in and talk about some of the university level support that we've been involved in at the OU. So between the three of us, we'll take turns talking through parts of those. And then at the end, we'll sort of reflect and pull out some of the sort of thoughts about this, you know, some of the things that work really well, some of the things that we think are a wee bit of a downside, some of the frustrations that we have as well. And it'll be great to get people's views around that. So please, you know, do respond to the questions, use the text chat, and maybe share your experiences as well. And that's probably one of the things that we could sort of say about the scholarship of teaching and learning, is that it's not just good enough to think about your own practice and look at what you're doing, but sharing it, making it public. And today's session and these webinars through Eden is just one of the best opportunities we get for doing that. It's all about sharing our ideas and working together as a community. And maybe that's one of the threads that'll come through today. Okay, so let's do the first of these kind of a little bit more focused Mentimeter things if you are able to, or use the text chat in the Zoom call if you prefer to use that over the Mentimeter. But put into the Mentimeter thing there any thoughts you have, terms or phrases that you would associate with the scholarship of teaching and learning. And really, folks, what we're wanting to do from doing this is just to get a gauge of how different people view this. And one of the things that has come through in the literature is that scholarship is a sort of contested term, and a term that's used in lots of different contexts. So maybe it'll, just as a starter for 10, if we start to get a bit of an idea from yourselves around what you view scholarship of teaching and learning to mean to you. So yeah, if you could just put into the Mentimeter if you're able. We'll give you a minute or two just to do that, so take a second. Let us know there, Diane, when some of the responses are starting to come through.
Yeah, there's some here now, so if you want to bring the slide up, Trevor.
Yeah, if I bring that up. I don't want to preempt people's responses on this, but
it's coming in nicely now.
If I flip that through, you start to see some of the things that people are putting in. But yeah, if you're able to add a few things in there, we'll start to get a sense of where this comes from. These are great, folks. Am I right in thinking here, Diane, if there's a term that's used a few more times than others,
that's
it might
right.
appear a little bit larger?
It does, yeah. It will. The larger the word, it means more than one person has, proportionately more than one person has added that particular term. So number one in the middle, collaboration, that's always good to see, isn't it? And teamwork. And of course, good practice, writ large there. And I can see a few similar words being put into the chat. Student engagement, teaching, content interactions. Yeah.
It's nice that there's certainly good overlap in the terms that people are adding in there, folks. And it's nice to see that kind of focus around quality, around collaboration and teamwork is great. The things around the edge of it as well are cool, because you know, some of this stuff about support and research, making things interactive, expertise, the knowledge that we have, support that's available. These are actually, you know, you're almost preempting the slides and the things that we want to talk about, because this is very much the focus for today, and kind of where we want to open up the conversation a bit, because I think if there is anything from this, you know, we framed today's session around this communities of practice and sense of community. And for me, in the work that I've been involved in the scholarship, being part of something that's bigger than yourself is really valuable. You know, it's been really, really nice. So But yeah, the way in which we do that is the thing that's interesting. Maybe plays out differently in everybody's context. So this is great. And just to say there, thanks as well. I see you had added into the text chat there and the Zoom thing as well around student teaching, content interactions, student engagement. These are, yeah, it's not a, these are the things. So we're all in the right ballpark. These are in the right place. Here's a little definition. If we think of the scholarship and teaching and learning as something that's matured over the years, people have been doing this for quite a while now. And there's a definition that we've sort of drawn on at the Open University. And I know there's many subtle different variations of these definitions, but there's some very common kind of factors to it. But we often, when we're talking to colleagues about this, we refer to it as being a sort of systematic practitioner-led inquiry into student learning that advances teaching in higher education by making the findings public. And the public group that you're sharing them with may vary now, because it could be within your institution or across institutions, maybe within your subject area or across subject areas, as we often have for the Scholarship Teaching and Learning conferences, where we're often sharing stuff across different subjects, which I think is really, really helpful. So that's a definition, and links into certainly some of the things that were coming up on the Mentimeter in the chat there. Often when talking to colleagues about this, you know, the distinctions between research and scholarship and the, you know, scholarly teaching, the scholarship of teaching and learning, and educational research, there's all these sort of slightly terms that are slightly different but related. We often thinking if you were putting them, not that there is a dichotomy to it, but it's sort of, if you think about teaching alone or research alone, I think there's this sort of shades between the two, and we often think of scholarly teaching as the way in which we're using evidence to inform our teaching practice, and maybe, you know, valuing of that as an important thing, because that creates the demand for the scholarship of teaching and learning, which is doing that work that gathers the evidence together that you know, is some of our findings that we're able to share with others. So there's this nice relationship between the two, the demand for it and the work that's done to further the investigations that we're covering. And then maybe separating that a little bit from the discipline-based education research, which is maybe slightly, sometimes it's a little more separate from practice. For us, I think the practitioner-led and the educators or students, in fact, being involved in these things and being a key part of the formation of questions and making scholarship as an engaged practice, I think, is something that we found really, really helpful and really interesting. So that frames things a little bit. It certainly draws on some of the things that people have mentioned. The other thing just to draw in for today's conversation a little bit is around the levels of support. And Simon's in 2020 had this publication around the 4M framework for the scholarship of teaching and learning, thinking about sort of micro individual researcher level piece there. You see at the bottom of the diagram, to maybe a department level or an institutional level to a national level. And I think, you know, the forms of support and the kinds of communities that we have are shaped at each of these levels. And I think maybe we'll use that a little bit today as well when we're talking about the support that's available for maybe through the faculty and how faculty can create and support culture as well as within schools or departments, and then maybe at the institutional level as well. And, you know, today's Eden network and this community that we're in today, you know, that is the transnational, isn't it? That's the international level. We're sharing stuff across Europe, which I think is, you know, is just a nice example of that mega piece. Okay, but what are the things that are going on? Certainly, Eden is one of the great support structures for stuff at the international level, but we'll think through some of the other parts to it as we go through today a little bit. Okay, so having framed those things, one of the things that I'll maybe say in the introduction, just to sort of set up, why is the scholarship of teaching and learning different to research? So for some of you that have maybe come from teaching backgrounds, or either through schools or universities or further education institutions, whatever context you're coming through to this work, your experience with research might be shaped by your subject area. You know, so if you're if you've studied sciences or social sciences or whatever, you're coming from research traditions, and those discipline-based research approaches are something that shapes us as researchers, but they also then impact how we engage with scholarship and maybe the kinds of support that we need for scholarship. So that's why we framed an interest in that. So for one of the things we've noticed is that within our university, where we're structuring support around our faculties, we have a faculty for science, technology, engineering, and maths, and another faculty for arts and social sciences. And you know, the traditions of research and the approaches of research are quite distinct in the two. So, you know, the way in which people might form the reasoning approaches with research, they might go from a theory, an established theory, and from that generate a hypothesis that can be maybe tested or confirmed or challenged. And that would be sort of STEM. Folks are often comfortable with that approach because they're coming at things from a well-established theory. Some social sciences stuff might be a little bit more around a tradition of making observations and forming patterns in order to create sort of tentative hypotheses and develop theory. So it's not that they are tied to a disciplinary approach or anything, but there's just stages of research in my view. And I think that, you know, this idea of where theory comes from and how it gets formed and where it gets challenged is a little bit of the research life cycle and where we are with that. But certainly for some of the work that we do in education and in scholarship, we're often trying to make observations, make things to explore areas of work. So there's a bit of a mix. A lot of this inductive work around observations, but sometimes as well, if we're doing stuff at larger scale, we're using established theories or established practices and testing things out in other areas. But these things, a lot of people maybe have a comfort area with one or the other, or perhaps discomfort area is one or the others, maybe a way of framing it. The other bit that goes with that, as well as our research approach, would be the methodologies and our methods that we're drawing on. So you might have a quantitative background or a qualitative background, or a mixed methods may be more comfortable for you. But again, depending on your subject area, sometimes that would be slightly different for different people. So I was an engineer. I did computer engineering as my first degree. So I come from that kind of quantitative background. But when I was doing my studies, I got very interested in human-computer interaction and the studies of people and psychology and that. So therefore, I learned a lot more around qualitative methods and sort of mixed methods approaches. But it's really through scholarship that I've developed a lot of that stuff as well. But again, for each of us, where we're coming from and the methods and support that we're familiar with might shape the kind of training or guidance we might need. So the implications of these things, just to draw it to that point, is you know, the educational research or the background that we have may well influence how we engage with scholarship. Perhaps we've got some assumptions around the evidence and what constitutes good evidence based on the disciplinary background that we've got. So sometimes when I'm talking to colleagues in statistics, I'm trying to convince them of the benefits of qualitative research. That can be a challenge if they don't understand why you'd be using qualitative research in the first place. And you know, things like that. So when we are effectively sort of crossing our boundaries a little bit, if we're coming out of our discipline, that can be something that can make people uncomfortable. I think it can be a very, very good thing, but it is something that sometimes people need support with. So there could be a bit of training or recognition from our peers. You know, sometimes doing the scholarship work is seen as something that's not valued or cared for in the same way as maybe our subject-based research, and that can be a negative thing in places. So folks, we're very quiet on the chat stuff so far, but do chip in with comments or questions there, folks. Hopefully this isn't too random. Certainly in terms of thinking about maybe where you're coming from, your background, your interests, that may help you think about maybe the kinds of support that you might need within your institutional context. So that's really what we're trying to set up there, folks, is kind of help that conversation. Okay, so what is it that makes things better, sort of enabling, enriching scholarship of teaching and learning? So for us, and trying to reflect on the work that we've been doing here and with other colleagues in the UK, the things that seem to help, certainly funding is something that would support, you know, maybe attendance and participation at conferences or expenses that might be associated with running studies. That's something that we sort of need to try and make sure that we can cover. There's a training and professional development, as I mentioned there, depending on where people are coming from, they may need certain guidance or support. Often peer support is a good way for us to frame that. I think we've found, and we'll show some examples of that today. The community aspect as well, sort of being part of either within your institution or maybe externally, is something that can help develop and help shape people's engagement with these things. And then showing that it has an impact, so demonstrating that the work really is making a difference, that helps give people a boost, those that have been doing it, but it also kind of validates and verifies the work that's done in the first place. So these things are kind of key and certainly shown through the literature to shape some of the work. And the last thing to mention there, and again, something that's been written about quite a bit, is around the recognition and rewards for scholarship work. And certainly something within the UK, when the professional standards framework for UK higher education came through, that's certainly one of those things that was helpful for us in terms of getting recognition for the work that we're doing in scholarship. And certainly it's one of those things that in the UK we've been working quite hard to try and make sure that promotion criteria matches the values of scholarship as well and scholarly teaching. Okay, so that's a bit of the introduction and the framing of the thing. What we'll move through to in a moment will be those institutional supports that we've got, and it'd be nice to hear about some of your experiences as well. Before we move through to that, I'll maybe just ask you to do one of these Mentimeter things, just to last one of these interactive ones in terms of the setup piece. But how important is the scholarship of teaching and learning for you? Now, do answer this. These are anonymously answered. We're not going to be using them for anything further. It's really for the purpose of discussion today. But it'd be helpful to get people's views around, is it important to you as an individual? Is it important to the school or the department, the kind of the working context that you're in? Or is it how important is it maybe within your institution's context? So maybe the place of employment that you're in now, or your own working context. So again, with the Mentimeter there, do have a try with that. And the numbers on the screen, hopefully. We'll give you a few moments to do that. If you're not able to access Mentimeter or you prefer not to, just let us know in the chat if you don't mind doing that. That's fine. But we'll give you a minute to do those questions, and then I'll bring them up. Diane, you just keep an eye there and give us a nod when there's something to show.
Yeah, people have started already, so over to you.
Brilliant. Oh, great, folks. Look, we really appreciate you participating and doing these little prompts. I know not everyone will necessarily get the chance to engage with them, but it really helps shape the conversation a little bit when there's something to respond to. So yeah, there's a nice sort of spread across these things in terms of if we feel they're unimportant on the left-hand side of the screen or important on the very important on the right-hand side of the screen. One of the nice things with this Mentimeter thing, although the scale is a 5-point scale that you can see in the questions there, the aggregation of the results shows us a bit of the spread. So certainly for that first one shown in blue on my screen, the top one, there's a good spread across the right-hand side and a bit of variation in the middle one, and then perhaps a little bit middle to the left in the bottom one. This is something that we've found comes through quite a lot, is as individuals, we identify with this stuff and really value it because it's kind of core to our teaching practice and of course our experiences. But sometimes, and certainly this has happened within our university and many others, we'll not necessarily get that sense that it's valued at the department or within the institution in the same way. So the spread of these is kind of, it's interesting and a wee bit concerning that.
And it's seeing that decreasing line, isn't it, as you move from the individual to the next level and then to the top level, that the importance of the perception of the importance of scholarship teaching and learning is changing. Yeah, no, there is a question in the chat, Trevor.
Oh, great. Let's pick up there. Yeah. Marina, thanks for this. Let me have a quick look and we'll see. Diane, you were there as well now.
Lots of the things that we're just about to come on to, actually, in that question.
Brilliant. Aria, you've done a fantastic, nice distillation of it there. Is exactly how are these things supported? And we'll say a little bit about what we've been doing and across the Open University, but it'd be great to hear other people's stuff as well. That thing about tying it to promotion though is really in the UK there was some nice studies done around the lack of that, and there's been a real shift. Actually, the numbers are really improving in terms of recognition, particularly to higher levels within the university. So the promotion into chair, the professor positions has really improved because people have thought this through in terms of criteria and recognition for contributions through scholarship, which I think has been important for us. But it's been a bit of a journey to do that. And it's a long process as well to change things like that. So, but let's pick that question up. We'll try to come back through actually as we're doing the other bits and pieces with the slides and stuff. I'm going to start the first part of that with the faculty support. So I'll say a little bit about how we do that. And again, this is just to say the Open University is not perfect. I'm very grateful for being employed there, but it's one example. We're just kind of sharing our experiences a little bit, and there's good days and bad days, but it is a thing of trying to think these things through. So we were saying there about some of those enablers at the Open University in the UK. For quite a while now, we've had a scholarship centre in the Faculty for science, technology, engineering, and math. So it's referred to as a STEAM. And but more recently, we've had another 3 faculty centres start up, one in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, one in the Faculty for Wellbeing, Education and Language Studies, and then our 4th faculty is the one for the Faculty of Business and Law, and that has its scholarship centre as well. So having a group of people that come together at the faculty level to think about their subjects and how that's taught, how that's supported and shared in that way is something that we found to be quite helpful. If we did it, a lot of places do it at the university level and maybe the connections are less strong. And some people do it at the school level, but then maybe you don't have the critical momentum that you need to pull things through. But this faculty level, it's a bit of the Goldilocks thing. There's different sizes and different support. We want support at all levels, but there's the ways in which we bring it together. So I'll start with the faculty one, and Fiona will say a little bit about the school, and Diane's going to talk about institution stuff. But all of these things connect and relate, and that's maybe an important thing to say on how scholarship gets support across the university. So let me start with that first one. The centre, as I mentioned, is called STEAM, and you can see the way in which we write the word there. It's trying to put the capitals on the STEM words in esteem. But scholarship for us is a thing about self-esteem, professional esteem. It's recognition and valuing what we do, and I think that was why we used that as a label for the centre. It came out of a group of work that had been done. The university had been looking at teaching and learning through subject-based stuff, but it was in 2010 that those groups came together and tried to form something that would be a wee bit more coherent and have a bit more critical mass, if you like. So since then, it's 25 now, so 15 years now, gosh. The team, the core team that sort of manage and run that, there's a director, which is an academic role that's 0.4 full-time equivalent, so that's sort of 2 days a week. The deputy director is 0.3, so about a third of the week. And then the other positions are full-time positions. So there's a scholarship manager, which is the sort of professional services side that literally does manage and run the centre. And then there's a support assistant that supports that work, and a project officer that looks after data and analysis, sort of the interface to institutional data sets and stuff. So you can see there with quite a small kind of core team, the director and deputy director role, that changes every few years. One of the reasons why we've got a deputy director and a director is that their terms are offset a little bit. So you'll be the deputy director for maybe 18 months and the director for 18 months. And that way, there's always a bit of continuity in terms of the direction. But it also, as you come in as deputy director, you learn the ropes from the director and you pass on. So that's one of the things that's enabled the sort of succession within the structures that we've had and enabled the centre to run. So I went into the role as a deputy director when Diane was the director, and as Diane moved on, there were other people that came through as deputy after me. So that's a piece that's been very important in terms of making it work. And those being part-time roles, I think, has been a valuable thing as well, because we're still practicing academics. It's not the only thing that we do. We're still teaching. We're still involved in other parts of the university, I think, which is, I think, respond to some of the questions there. It's how you integrate scholarship into the everyday and how you value it and support it every day is important. So within the schools then, so that's the core faculty structure. Within the schools, there's an academic that gets some time to do the leading of scholarship within their schools. So each faculty for us, we've got 6 schools within the STEM faculty. So scholarship lead, again, is a fixed term position. You can't hold on to it for too long, but it is something that gives you an opportunity to coordinate and link with and support communication within your school and help build that community and sort of community of practice within your school for engaged in scholarship, which has been an important role for us. We also have students that work with us. We have a student reference panel we meet with quarterly, and they're quite actively involved in a lot of the student activities for the university. We're not saying that they're completely representative. It's a sort of voluntary piece that people join the panel for, but they've been really wonderful in terms of insight from students and stuff and helping guide the centre and making sure that the scholarship work we're doing is relevant and grounded with a student voice. That's been good for us. The advisory group is a broader group then. They meet just once a year. It would be sort of management across the university, sort of senior roles, as well as a couple of external people as well, that just really have that governance structure, help check that the centre is running in the right direction for the university and that everything's kind of going well. So the advisory group, if you like, is a sort of help give a bit of steer, but there's quite a lot of autonomy. And again, coming back to that definition of it coming from the practitioners, being a centre that is a community-based thing, it's enabling people to do scholarship for themselves. And so, these structures are really just enabling and facilitating them. So we do that through projects. So a project might last maybe for 18 months or so. And it might give people, a time to look at a particular aspect within a course, or maybe across courses, maybe a particular teaching method or approach. But it allows them to run a study and gives them a bit of support to do that. They tend not to be. Previously, we've had 2 calls a year, and actually this year there's only a single call. And part of that is the current context within the UK. The finances are pretty bad. I think come and go within the universities, but certainly at the moment there's a lot of financial pressure, so the budgets are being reduced for work like this, and it'd be interesting to hear if that's the experience in other institutions as well. But so we did have 2 calls a year. This year there's just the one. Hopefully that can be resolved again over time as things improve, but it's one of those things that enables the work, the call for projects. There's a portfolio of about 60 projects running, and there's been a couple of hundred that have been completed. You can see we've been going quite a while. The role for these projects and how we manage them and facilitate them, they're varying sizes and varying shapes, so it's not a straight thing by time, but certainly there's a good body of work that's been completed over the years the centre's been running. The other thing to say around that, so to enable those projects and to make sure that they complete and get through, there is that aspect about the professional development support. So I mentioned previously about the UK Professional Standards Framework, which is run now through Advanced HE, but was originally referred to as the Higher Education Academy Fellowship Scheme. So some of you may have came across that. I think they now support that internationally as well. So there may be equivalent things in your own countries as well. But again, it's that recognition of professional development around the quality of teaching and the work that we're doing that has been helpful for us, because scholarship projects that people do, they're able to write up as case studies for their fellowship scheme, and that's been helpful. It's a useful enabler for people. And the last thing that I've added there is the ways in which we do the communications. So we have seminars, or we refer to them as seminars because it's a STEM faculty. We have an internal conference every year for the STEAM Centre. That's usually in April or May. It's a couple of days where the various project teams come together and share the work that they've been doing. We discuss scholarship for 2 days. And then we've been involved in helping set up and support a national conference within STEM higher education called the Horizons of STEM Higher Education. And if anyone's interested, it'll be in Birmingham this summer. So the call is currently out. If you are able to put in an abstract for that, if you look up Horizons in STEM Higher Education, you'll come across the conference there. But again, all of those things at the end there, they're all about community. They're all about bringing people together. We try and make sure that they're done in a way that's not so expensive, but certainly is kind of community focused, community orientated. So I know there's an awful lot on that side, and I've probably rushed through it a little bit quickly, but hopefully from that you can sort of see the kind of structures that with the faculty level, we're able to put some posts aside that focus on coordinating this activity. The number of people that are involved in scholarship is probably about 500. There's a staff, you were saying there about the body of staff. It's quite a high proportion of our staff would be involved in these projects, and they may be involved in technical development of courses, or the academic development, or the support of students. The scholarship is open to all colleagues, and it's something that we try to encourage across the institution through the centre. So I'm going to pause and stop at that point, and I think I'll hand over now to Fiona, and she'll say hopefully a bit about one of the specific contexts of the school that she's involved in. So over to you, Fiona.
Okay, thanks very much, Trevor. So yes, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the role that I have within my own school. So I'm a senior lecturer and what I call a staff tutor, which means I look after our tutors who tutor a lot of our modules in the Open University. But alongside that, I am what we call one of these scholarship leads for my school. So I have a small proportion of my time is devoted within the school to promote obviously scholarship within the school, but also to be involved with the STEAM. So when those project calls that Trevor was talking about come out, I I'm part of what we call the scrutiny group. I will look at those. I'll sign off the projects for my own school, but then I will also be part of that scrutiny process of, looking at the projects that come in and making sure that, they are to the standards that, that we're wanting within it. So if you maybe just go to the next slide, Trevor, if you can. So within so when I took over this role, there'd been a lot of time spent on producing what we call a scholarship plan at the faculty and university level at that stage. And, we would have occasional get-togethers, shall we say, within the school, but then COVID hit. And I took over this role just about the time of COVID, and everything was going completely online. So there weren't the opportunities to meet together in Milton Keynes in research groups the way we had before. So I talked to a few of my colleagues, and we decided we would start a virtual, basically, research group, and we would meet in Teams, which is the medium that we tend to use in the OU. And we sort of thought, right, well, how are we going to meet? So we decided we would keep it very low key because everybody was very, very busy, as I'm sure everybody was with the pandemic. And we met every other month for an hour. And initially, a lot of it was really, to be honest, just about community building, talking about what we were doing, talking about how we were making time to do any of this work with all the other pressures that were coming our way. And out of that, we found that work quite well in the first year, because I'm now in my second year in this role. We found that work quite well. And the other thing we were finding is we just weren't being able to carve out much time to fit in our scholarship. But we did find that those of us who worked full time tend to be Fridays. In my school, our school's quite good about trying to have fewer meetings on a Friday. So every other month on a Friday afternoon, we put 2 hours into our Teams calendar and we meet, and we'll literally just say to each other, what are you going to do this afternoon? We'll go off and do it, and then we'll come back in at the end of the 2 hours and say that we've done it. And the feedback I get from colleagues, this is quite helpful, because for a start, it makes you think, oh yes, I was doing that scholarship project. I need to devote some time to it. And I think just, again, having that community supporting each other, has been really useful, as well. So when it comes to the meetings, we have a range of people that come. So what I did was, when I was setting it up, I asked for a list of basically everybody who's involved in doing any sort of scholarship of teaching and learning within the school. So I got a list of people, I emailed everybody and invited them along. So out of that, we've got a core of people. We've got people from postgraduate research students who are researching in this area, the educational research area, in the environmental science and geology areas, right up to professors who, colleagues like Diane, in my school, who are working in. We have one colleague who does an awful lot of work in assessment, so he comes along and supports the group. And we also occasionally do longer writing retreats, but I must admit that's the thing that we have found has not worked quite so well lately, that people find it really difficult to devote that full day to, maybe, especially if it's online. I think in the days when maybe you could have done it face to face, it might have been different. So that's something we might think about for the future. So Trevor, if you just go to the next slide, we'll just maybe show a few of the sort of topics that we've maybe covered. So again, so what we've done, we very much do it as a sort of community. I'll just say to people, well, what would we like to, what would our topics like to be? What would you like to know more? What would you like some support on? So we've had things like presentations on using NVivo. As Trevor said, I'm in a school where a lot of people are coming from what I'd call more of a hardcore science background, where we're probably quite comfortable doing our statistics and doing our quantitative analysis. In this area, where you are using more thematic analysis and other techniques which we're maybe not so familiar with, we found that sessions around how to use NVivo and little tricks and tips around some of the things like software. Something else that we use is some of the online survey tools as well. JISC, we had a very good session recently where a couple of colleagues just gave really good advice about how to go about setting up a JISC survey. In a slightly different area, we had the person who looks after all our PhD students in school come along and talk to us about, how do you recruit PhD students and how do you support them? Again, this is something some of us are maybe not quite, not maybe done quite so much of that. And we have managed, which has been really good last year, we managed to find a time when a lot of us were going to be in Milton Keynes for other reasons. And we had a face-to-face meeting. So we had about a 4-hour meeting on a day. And we started off with 3-minute talks, basically on our current research. And it was so helpful. I think we all found it useful just to we're a big organisation in the Open University, and we are dispersed. A lot of us live around the country. Some of us are what we call regional academics, like I live in Ireland and I have colleagues live all around the country, and we don't always know what each other's doing. And it was really helpful just to get that. And you can see people talking to each other about how they're going to say, well, I could help you with that, or what about that? Didn't know you were doing that. And that was really helpful. So we're planning to have another face-to-face meeting, again this year. So anybody involved in the group seems to find it really helpful. I find the attendance is good, and that's always a good sign. I think people turn up to things that they want to do, don't they? So it has been really, and I certainly am really enjoying being part of that group within my school. I think the last slide, Trevor, just shows a couple of the other ways in which we share what we're doing more widely. We have internal and external facing websites. And we have a page on that where all of our current research projects that we're involved in are listed there. So that's useful for people. The Open University also has a research repository called Open Research Online, so that where people have maybe gone to a conference, got something published in conference proceedings, or they've published a paper, we can get them added to there. And when I was setting up the group, my head of school said, well, why don't we get that, get our little research group added to this repository so that people can now link to it. And he was quite surprised with how many papers. He said to me, oh, Fiona, I thought there might have only been 30. And I think the last count, there was about 72 papers were associated with our school. So I think that's the other thing with some of this area. You don't always realize how much work is actually being done and being shared, more widely with it. So that just gives you a little bit of a flavour about how it works in one school. And I would just say that Esteem has always been really supportive, and it's been great that we have that, had that support within the faculty, which I think has really helped, push our scholarship forward. And I'll now hand over to Diane, who'll talk more about the institutional level of things.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Trevor, if you could just move the slide on. Okay, so I'm going to be quite brief here, but I'm going to cover some quite big issues. We gave you that little activity in Mentimeter to say how important scholarship was to you and to your school or department and to your faculty and to your institution. So I'm looking at the institutional level, and when you responded, those of you who responded thought that the level of support and importance for scholarship of the 3 levels was lowest at the institution level. And I think that would probably be a similar reflection in the Open University. The way that scholarship has developed in the OU started very much at the faculty level, and then it grew down to support the individual practitioner or the project teams. And then, fortunately, it was allowed to blossom upwards. So the Esteem model that Trevor detailed, the way that a scholarship centre was created to provide a community of practice around the development of scholarship within that area. Yeah, those are the points. That feeling of it changing in direction, it actually enabled the good practice of Esteem to be adopted elsewhere. So about 6 years ago, it was decided that we needed to have not just leave scholarship to the faculty and to the one faculty, the STEM faculty, that was doing much work on it. That's not to say there wasn't some scholarship in the other faculties. There was excellent work going on, but there weren't the communities of practice around scholarship that we feel are so enabling for individuals. So the plan came out, and the decision was that we would have a scholarship centre in each of the faculties. And in order to do that, advice was taken from people who were running a STEAM at the time, I was one of them, to try and capture our practices and how we did things in a very practical way to share with the new incoming sister scholarship centres. That was really successful. It enabled people to sort of learn from the benefit of all the experience that had gone on for 10 years previously of a STEAM existing, to make sure that that advice and guidance was passed on to our colleagues in other faculties. And that worked extremely well, and these other scholarship centres were established. So are modelled along the esteem line. There was a steering group put in place at university level to try and make sure that wherever you were in the university, you had an opportunity to contribute to scholarship. Even in the roles of people who are not necessarily academic staff. So academic related or professional services staff, as we call them, are also supported to undertake scholarship. It's not seen as a solely academic enterprise. After all, student support, which is often undertaken in many different aspects of student support, undertaken by professional services staff, and they contribute so much to teaching and learning and supporting our students indirectly, that their perspective on how things could be improved and the importance of scholarship to provide an evidence base for that improvement is absolutely vital. So we try to see our scholarship communities not just being academic, but being much broader than that. For example, involving our library, involving our student support staff, involving our advisory staff, and also our media, our learning designers and developers. What came from that first scholarship plan was an opportunity for scholarship not to take place with necessarily just in the faculty boundaries, although that is important that people get an opportunity to work within their own scholarship centre, but also to work with colleagues drawn from other faculties than their own and from the wider university. And money was set aside for what we call pan-university scholarship projects. And this was often to work on the sort of the wicked problems around supporting students in digital and distance education. You know, the things that doesn't matter whether you're studying maths or engineering or history or whatever. It doesn't matter, because they're the same sort of problems for all those students. And a lot of those pan-university projects look at those really, really deep-seated issues and problems, and are having significant impact on practice across the university and making changes. We've tried to support the sort of the processes by which people undertake their scholarship projects. We have a way in which people can seek permission to work with our students. They have to have ethical approval to conduct scholarship projects with our students. And we do have a panel to make sure that our students are not over-surveyed, and that any surveys or any qualitative or quantitative work that's done with our students meets certain standards. And we support that process of getting permissions, institutional permissions to do your scholarship work through various means. We have this thing called the researcher's journey, where people come together to learn about how they can navigate their way through those approvals processes to get permission to do their work, their scholarship work, appropriately. And the staff involved in those parts of the university that run these processes offer monthly drop-ins, and they have lots of advice online. So these are ways in which people are given practical support in how to do their scholarship. And this could not be more important for novices, for people who are undertaking their very first scholarship project. As Trevor said, people who've never done qualitative research before, it's not something that features within their own methodologies for connected to their discipline. They need to be shown, and they need to be helped, and they need to be mentored and supported to do these things. The barrier to taking part in scholarship for some staff is so high that unless you put this support in, they won't get involved. And the people that will lose out as a result of that are not just the staff themselves, but are the students who would have benefited from the work those staff would do on improving the student experience. So it's about support. It's about high-level support and this is what hopefully the university scholarship plan is trying to offer. It's recognizing, and it's sort of putting a line in the sand to say scholarship matters, scholars matter, the people who are doing the work need supporting, and we're also going to help them deliver impact, because you can do the most wonderful piece of scholarly work, and you can even get a published paper out of it. You can go to a conference, you can present your findings and your suggestions and recommendations to improve the student learning experience. But if nobody in your own institution takes any notice of you, and nothing in your own institution changes as a result of your scholarly work, then really it's a failure. That seems a very harsh way of saying it, but the thing about scholarship is it has to make things better for students. It has to inform other practitioners. So helping staff develop impact within their own institution, making sure that their findings are put into practice, is a role for the university as a whole. For them to be using their scholars' work to inform the university level practices could not be more important. Unfortunately, we have a promotions process which in the university which rewards academic staff to be involved in scholarship. There are routes through to professorial level. We have a lecturer to senior lecturer to professorial level, and then we have several bands within the professorial category. Within the criteria for people to be promoted, there are clear links to scholarship. So scholarly work, improving the practice of teaching and learning, counts. That sort of work is not just something that people do to try and become better teachers and try and give their students a better experience. It actually counts. It's seen as so beneficial for the institution that it counts towards people's promotion. And therefore that in itself amazingly raises the status of the scholarship of teaching and learning across the institution. And that's been for a number of years now. Since 2015, the criteria for our promotions process really has reflected the burgeoning scholarship community within the institution. Another publication that we've produced, this has come out of Esteem again, is a support tool. This is a free open educational resource on our platform called Open Learn that you can find. Anyone can enroll for it, doesn't cost anything, and it's a description. It's a course about being a scholarly teacher and undertaking scholarship of teaching and learning projects. And this has been really useful, although it's primarily directed at STEM. You don't have to be a STEM practitioner for this to make sense to you. And we're aware that lots of people across our institution and elsewhere have used this as a stepping stone to get into STEM subjects, into scholarship in STEM subjects. So it's been really helpful. So we've tried to detail, Trevor starting, Fiona now me, we try to detail the support at different levels that has to be put in for successful scholarship communities to develop. It has to develop with the practitioner, the individual practitioner at the centre, and then there has to be these radiating rings of different levels of support going on, provided at the school level, so very local to the individual undertaking the work, their most immediate colleagues, to the level of their faculty, so the next level of next immediate colleagues, people working in roughly the same big discipline areas as they are, and then finally up to university levels. So those lessons around scholarship can be devolved across the whole institution. So those are the sort of three levels we've been talking about. So what I want to ask you now is, what's your context? What sort of support do you need in your context? So I'm going to go to another little Mentimeter, and this is one where you can type in a slightly more detailed response. So if Trevor could just move the slide forward, just to show the code again. There we go. So if you go back to the QR code, and this is what support do you need for SoTL in your context? You may never have had the time or the space or the support, any sort of support to do scholarship. So can you think of ways in which you could be better supported, what you would need if you wanted to undertake more scholarship. And while you're doing that, I'm just looking at a comment in the chat. Can you example of scholarly works that improve teaching and learning? Goodness me, so many, so many different things, from relatively small scale things to very large things that have changed assessment practices, for example. Things that have changed presentation patterns, things that have impacted on the way in which tutorial support happens for our students and have informed associate lecturers who deliver our tutorials to improve their practice. Trevor, can you think of any specific ones, or Fiona?
I was going to do a shameless plug for there's I'll put into the chat area the Esteem website, and there's an impact area in that where we put together a little compendium, give some examples, case studies of the impact of some of these projects. But some of them, there was a nice piece of work done around the way in which we engage with students. Because we're a distance learning institution, we don't always have face-to-face contact with our students. And one of the nice pieces of early scholarship work that we did was to look at the students who are sort of doing well. All of the kind of learning analytics and predictors and stuff that we have can sort of make some predictions around, based on students' behavior, how likely they are to be successful. And we found there were groups of students who were very successful, despite maybe not having the best of predictions. So we asked them, the scholarship project was to go and ask them, well, what were they doing? What was their magic? That given their past record of that, they may not have studied so well at a distance. So it was the insight from that project that led to us opening up and changing when students can start their courses. So prior to that, we had a fixed date that students could start. And it was basically, we call it the Early Starts program, introduced it so that students could start to access the materials and get ready for study. And for some students that maybe hadn't been familiar with studying for a while, the ones that were being very successful, actually, they were looking at the materials, getting ahead and staying ahead all the way through the course. So that when all the other things in life that happened to them that impacted their capacity to study, when something went wrong, they weren't derailed. They were already ahead by a week, so they could have a week of life events that didn't take them out of the course and still make it. And so insights like that, small scholarship projects that are done in a particular focused context, but get a really strong insight. Then when we're able to bring in an intervention that changed as a result, the very first year that we brought that intervention in, we identified that 40 more students completed the course than would have if there hadn't been that intervention in place. At least the change and the impact that it seemed to have was around 40 more students being retained through the course. So it's a direct financial benefit in terms of student fees, let alone student outcomes as well, the benefit for institutions. So it's cases like that where we've been able to identify a small project, shown something, made a change and impact through time. I think those are the kind of things that we might refer people to in the case studies. But yeah,
we've got I was just thinking of a couple actually that have now sprung to mind. Paired programming in computing. We didn't used to have, we're a very huge distance learning institution, and it was thought, putting students together to work into groups is difficult. Putting them together to work in pairs is nigh on impossible. But a project was run through Esteem to demonstrate the benefits to students of a paired programming in computer science approach, where students would actually work together in a pair. And the benefits of it far outweighed the difficulties it took in setting up. The students loved it. It was improved assessment scores. And now that has not just been adopted in the module that it was first rolled out in, but has now spread through the whole qualification. So as an approach to developing students' computing practice, that would be another one. Fiona, do you have another one?
Yeah, the one I was going to suggest was a more recent one, which is probably just starting to show its impact, where some colleagues looked at providing students with copies of tutorial slides ahead of the tutorials. And that is now being rolled, and they found that it made a difference to the retention rate and things, especially for students who are maybe declaring disabilities, or maybe say a caring responsibility, things. There is a whole host of reasons that people might want to have those tutorial slides just a little bit ahead of the tutorial happening. And I can see that as now it's been rolled out across my school, because the project originally started my school, and I can see it's now being adopted much further over STEM. And a slightly different one that I'm actually involved in myself, is one around eco-anxiety. And that all came out of students saying they were anxious about some of the stuff we were teaching in environment projects. It led to an esteem project. We've then had one of these pan-university type projects. And like, so next week I'm involved in the Northern Ireland Science Festival, working with the public. So that again was something that just came out of a very small, basically a conversation between a tutor and students, but because the support was there, through the school, the faculty, and Pan University, that work has then been able to, continue to being having much bigger impact. So there may be slightly different ones, but that's just a couple that comes bang to my mind.
Thanks, Fiona. That's really good. I've got one more before we'll move on, which was around formative assessment. And this was in engineering. A group of staff who worked on a particular module team were refreshing the formative assessment on the module. And they'd had some student sort of grumblings about the quality of the formative assessment, whether it was really doing setting lots of quizzes and lots of tests for students to test their own understanding. And a lot of students were saying that they weren't particularly helpful. So what the module team did through an esteem project is recruited some of last year's students, people who had taken the module in the previous year, and said, will you come and help us rewrite the questions for the maximum student benefit? What do you know what the pitfalls and the difficulties are in the module? How can we make these formative quizzes better and suit the needs of the students? So they ran a really nice workshop. They invited these students. I think they had half a dozen students who gave up their time voluntarily to support the module team, and they regenerated the whole of the formative assessment for a 60 credit module. And the massive improvement in the quality of the response from the students, the uptake and the participation of doing those quizzes. They'd previously been largely ignored by the students, but they started to do them because the students had pointed the formative questions at the things that students struggle with, and not the things that staff think the students struggle with. So this is a lovely example of student co-creation as well in scholarship, and this is something that's incredibly valuable, bringing the student voice into scholarship projects, not just as participants, not just answering surveys or being interviewed and giving their views, but bringing them into the actual creation of the scholarship project in the first place. So it's directed at things that matter to students rather than the things that we think matter as staff matter to students. As Trevor's put the link into lots of our other projects, these are the STEM ones, but there are ones that are really lovely examples across the whole university for teaching all sorts of disciplines and for general student support and assessment issues too. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to people's responses. Trevor, did you want to share the responses to that question, which was what support do you need for SoTL in your context? Okay. So the classic one, resources and time, I can see. I presume teaching relief means time out of teaching, or a lesser of a teaching burden in order that you have time to devote to scholarship. I think that's a very common response. Logistics checklist for starting a faculty SoTL group. That's something we may be able to help you with because we've got lots of experience in doing that. So do get in touch. More time for professors to dedicate and to know the theory better. Absolutely. It's so important that people start well, are informed well, are supported well, and then do good scholarly work, and then that builds onto more. Encouragement, yes. If the culture in your institution says this is important, then people will pay attention to it. But if the message, even the subliminal message that you may be getting, that look, just get on with the teaching, that's what matters. There's no time to keep changing things. There's no time to investigate your practice. We've just got to keep on the treadmill. Then that culture is very difficult to kick against, particularly for the individual. I love the SoTL showcase with regional universities. Great idea, absolutely. Speaking to Trevor's point of, getting out there, talking to people, having those building bridges with other institutions in your region or outside your region. Knowledge of methodology, navigating practice, ethical practices and processes. absolutely key. So a lot of these things we have ticked off in the approach that we've made. I wouldn't say it's perfect, and there's lots we could learn from other institutions who've done similar work. There are 2 or 3 other universities in the UK who are renowned for scholarship, and they have developed slightly different processes. There's not just one way to do this well, but yeah, definitely that making space and time for these things couldn't be more important. I just saw another one. Project grants available to a wider range of teachers. Yes, I mean the approach that we've taken is very much project based. We all our academic staff have some research time. It's not very much, and often it gets eroded away by the requirements of other things. But everybody has a little bit of time, and Esteem provides a little bit of money. It's not a huge amount to do these scholarship projects. We expect the member staff to use their scholarship time to do this work, but we'll give them a little bit of money for all the various things that when you're running a project you need a little bit of money for, and also sometimes a little bit more money if you want to go to a conference and present your work. So there needs to be some money put there. It cannot be free, and people do need to have a bit of time, or it's it becomes an impossible thing with the demands of the day job. Yeah, so a lot of the things we can sort. Culture and providing time are the 2 tricky things that no matter what structures you put in place, if the institution doesn't support those. But I think what's worked in our institution is beating senior managers over the head with things like the frameworks that are in place in the UK to maintain standards in higher education. So we have something called the Teaching Excellence Framework, which is an England activity, not Scotland or Ireland, but it's England and Wales only. And it is it's a process that all institutions have to jump through. They have to be evaluated. And one thing that makes a difference in any Teaching Excellence Framework submission is the institution saying, we take our students' learning experience seriously, and we have undertaken a body of work and a body of support in order that we can improve that year upon year upon year. So that really helps. It's a bit of a blunt instrument, having the government looking at what you're doing, but it has made some difference to the view that scholarship really matters, because it can help improve your metrics around student retention, completion of their courses, progression onto another course, and what they say in those all-important surveys about how good their student experience was. We have something called the National Student Survey, which is an annual survey of people leaving higher education, and those scores matter very much. That if you come out in the top 3, it's touted round at how marvelous your university is. So senior managers in the UK do take notice of these things. So it is a little bit more like pushing on an open door, but that's not to say it'll continue like that forever, because as I'm going to talk about in a little while, universities are under an immense financial pressure at the moment. I'm sure this is the same all over Europe, probably the whole world, but particularly in the UK, we can't put our student fees up, and we are a bit stuck for cash, to be crude. Okay, thank you very much for your responses to that. Very much, we've asked this question in other contexts, and it's very much similar answers that we've got. So let's move on. Looking at the time, we're doing okay. So this is just to wrap up, really, to think about reflections and what's next. Where is scholarship of teaching and learning going in the future? And I've mentioned some of the threats that we're facing on the right hand side of my slide here. Some of the threats that we face in institutions that don't have a culture of scholarship of teaching and learning. How do you turn that around? That can be really difficult. And even if your university does have a current culture that supports the scholarship of teaching and learning, is that going to continue? And this is where the current financial climate and whether that support will be continued indefinitely is a real issue. As Trevor mentioned, even in the OU, which has made scholarship of teaching and learning one of its absolute central planks of its ethos around developing teaching and learning, we are seeing that the money is tight and the opportunity to do projects is being diminished. It's not gone altogether, but instead of 2 calls for project a year in the STEM faculty, we're now down to 1. We're having to fight our corner. We're running as fast as we can just to stay still. So 10 years ago, we were looking at the size of the project portfolio in STEAM growing every year, growing bigger and bigger, more projects, more things going on. Now, potentially, we're seeing a reduction in the number of projects going on. And there's a worry then that critical mass is lost. Once the number of people undertaking scholarship gets smaller and smaller and smaller, then that community of practice feeling and that is lost, it diminishes. And then it becomes harder to sustain. So we're worried about this, and I'm sure that a lot of you will be in a similar circumstances. As financial pressure gets greater, staff overload, teaching load growing and growing and growing, staff numbers going down or not keeping pace with increasing enrolments. These are all issues that make sustaining a scholarship culture within an institution difficult. And although in the OU and a number of UK universities recognise the importance of scholarship, not all institutions do. So there are a lot of promotions profiles, for example, in many universities that are relatively close to people who do the teaching and the scholarship. It's not as easy, and it's not as easy even in the OU to get to be promoted as a teacher to professor without having a research background, a research in your own discipline background. So appropriate recognition is not, we're getting there, things are improving, but they're not necessarily improving as fast as we would like them, given the importance of teaching to institutions. I'll probably show my colours here when I say that you can be a stellar researcher and bring in a small amount of money every year, and you can be a teacher that teaches a module that brings in millions and millions of pounds in a large institution like the OU and not get promoted. It's still it's not necessarily equitable. However, those are the threats. Let's be more positive. Look at the opportunities that there are for scholarship of teaching and learning. There's a huge opportunity now for us to look at SoTL practice across disciplines, to look at the student learning experience in a more holistic way and think about how students learn. We've got lots of very challenging things coming our way that are really ripe for scholarly work, particularly in digital learning. I mean, this is just huge now. We're all digital learning institutions. Even those who don't teach at a distance have effectively become digital. And how do we do that well? How do we teach our students well? What's the technology pedagogy gap? How do we work with the new technologies that are available? One of the things that all three of us were at an international conference in Cyprus later last year, in the autumn of last year. And the one thing that every talk, I think 2 out of every 3 of the presentations was about generative AI. And this is a massive, some might say existential crisis, others might say opportunity. I'll leave you to decide what it is. But it's a huge thing. And it's coming, and we have to think and respond to how we're going to assess our students, how we're going to teach and assess our students in the generative AI world. That's just one example of enormous numbers of changes that have come as a result of digitization of education. We've also got things like extended reality and virtual reality, and how effective those are as mediums for teaching students. What evaluation has been done of these things? Can we, what level of investment is appropriate for these new technologies, given that we're not really sure how students learn with those things, and things have not been necessarily evaluated. Inclusion is another enormously hot topic. Why do we have awarding gaps between students? Even students who come into a program with largely the same educational background. We have a significant awarding gaps between our black and our white students, for example, in the OU. Very, very worrying awarding gaps that we struggle to explain. We've done an awful lot of scholarship in the last 5 years in this particular area, but it's not an interesting, it's not a topic, it's not a, there's no quick fix for this. It's a very complex problem. But scholarship for teaching and learning is massively helping us understand and get to the bottom of where to start to improve things. Not how to fix it, but where to start on that journey. I mentioned student co-creation and centering student voices in the scholarship of teaching and learning. This is a huge opportunity. This is something that's really come to the fore in the last few years, working in collaboration with students, enabling students to work with us on scholarship projects. So their voices are really central in the process, and it's not students being done to. In terms of scholarship for teaching and learning, but us involving them in the inquiry process themselves. We've got some brilliant examples in the faculty of students often working as paid interns, working in the scholarship space, which has been really revolutionary for our practice. And there's nothing more powerful than having a student voice on a project. It really does direct the project team to the things that really matter. Other opportunities around professional development. We know that is absolutely key to good scholarship, and there are massive opportunities for us to support one another and one another's development in our SoTL communities. I'm not sure about other countries, but I should think it's probably very similar that the higher education workforce in the UK is changing considerably, and the balance between staff who do research and teaching, and who just do teaching. And I shouldn't have put that word "just" in there, but it slipped in because I've been indoctrinated in my own culture. There you go. So we've got research, we've got teaching, and we've got people who do research and teaching in the middle. The number of people who do only research and the number of people who only do teaching they're changing. There are far more people who teach only in higher education now than there has ever been in the UK higher education workforce. And the scholarship of teaching and learning is their thing. They should be supported, because that's, in doing this work, they bring their academic expertise to the fore. And then finally, we are seeing burgeoning national and international networks for people who are undertaking scholarship of teaching and learning. And Trevor mentioned a few. We're in one at the moment, Eden. There is also SoTL, International Society Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And in the UK, we've got Horizons, but there are other groups. There are other groups that run seminars and run conferences and bring universities together. In the UK, the Higher Education Academy is very powerful in this space of bringing people together and running networks of fellows of the Higher Education Academy across different universities, bringing them together to talk about the student experience and how it can be improved in an evidence-based way. So on the one hand, we've never seen more focus on the scholarship of teaching and learning. And this is the point, to go back to the threats, where you have to defend its position and make sure that people who want to conduct this sort of work are given the time and the space to do that. Okay, so I think we've got one last Mentimeter question. Is that right, Trevor? So this is our last one, and then we're going to leave you alone, I promise. So if you'd like to go back to the code, and this is a bit of a reflection for you. How would you go about raising the profile of scholarship of teaching and learning in your own institution? What might you do? I mean, you might come from an institution that's got a rich heritage, a rich culture of scholarship where everyone's really supported, and some fantastic work gets done, and it's fed back into changes for the students and so forth. Or it may be that you're a lone voice and you're the only one who's on the desperate edges of your time, trying to do a little bit of work and perhaps get people to take notice of it. If that's the case, what would you do to raise the profile? What could you do? Do you have any suggestions? Everybody's thinking. I mean, in my time, I think my solution was to bore everybody by constantly talking about the scholarship of teaching and learning. You're constantly saying, "Have we asked the students? Could that be different? Could that be better?" Just asking awkward questions. Why do we do it that way? Has it been evaluated? Don't you think we should try? Those sorts of awkward questions.
I was going to say I remember you coming across and saying, "Have you evaluated that recently?" What was the evaluation on that? And it is that. I mean, it's we set a tough standard for this stuff, but it pays off.
Yeah, it does. It does. I think we've stunned everyone into silence.
Didn't you get a few? Or any?
Not yet. No.
Anybody? Oh,
somebody's appeared. Yeah, there's a few now. If you want to show the page.
Let's bring those up, folks, just to give us something to talk around, and then that'll sort of help us transition into questions and more discussion. But yeah, this idea of raising profile, Diane was saying there, it's not. I'm sure this is the case across all of our institutions, but wherever teaching context you're in, the finances have to go a long way, and we need to make the best of what we've got. And currently in the UK, there's a bit of constraints. There's a few challenges around it. So we constantly need to raise a profile and retell the story, because people forget as well through the staff turnover and stuff. We're fortunate that we've had this centre for a few years running, but new people coming through wouldn't necessarily have come across it or be aware of this. So it is.
I mean, just looking at somebody's response, online chats about the things that worked in my class this month. Absolutely, it's talking to other people and sharing. I did this. It had this effect. It seemed to work really well. And then someone going off saying, "Well, I'll try that as well. Oh, yeah, that did work really well. Have you tried this?" And that's the scholarly teaching. And gradually, that the dropping the pebble in the middle of the pond and the ripples start to spread out, it spreads to more people, and then you try other new things, and then someone adapts what you did in a slightly new way, and then they tell you about it again, so then you try that, and so it goes on. And it's that scaffolding of your experience and matching it with the experience of other people, and then it just grows and grows and grows.
I remember folks saying about, what can little old me do, sort of thing. What are the small things I can, and actually sometimes just turning up to the monthly chat and asking a question that you don't know the answer to is a great contribution, because it gets the conversation. The thing that's hard to create is curiosity. But if you've got the curiosity, that can drive an awful lot of other stuff. So I think things like that are great.
And it's so easy when you're really, really busy to withdraw into tasks that you have to do on a day in a week. It's so easy to do that, but it's so empowering when you say, "I'm not going to do that. I know I've got a to-do list as long as my arm, but I'm going to go and talk to other people about teaching and learning." And that's hugely beneficial. And I know somebody said make more interdisciplinary links between the schools. Yeah, because we can learn so much from one another. And in different, learning in one area is so easily translated to learning in another area. Our ethics is a real, it's a real stumbling point for lots of people. We often compare notes about how long it's taken to get ethical approval for projects. Fortunately, we have people running our ethical approval processes who are incredibly supportive, and that does make a huge difference. And because they're used to dealing with novices, either our PhD students, our own PhD students who've never done it before, or our members of staff who are novices, I think that helps a lot. That there's no such thing as a silly question with them. They really are supportive and helpful, and they don't, speaking from personal experience, they don't usually make you feel small and inadequate for asking simple questions.
It's a nice suggestion around the how-to videos, though, because sometimes those kind of short, just walk through pieces. Actually, it's not too, well, I would say it's not too hard to put something like that together. And actually, if somebody has, rather than having to if you do run workshops or things like that, you got to wait for them to come around, or chances are you've just missed one at the time you needed it. If you are able to, if it's a Teams call or a Zoom call, if you're able to record it at the same time and give it a quick edit or something.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Just a short piece to explain the form to people, how to fill it in.
Yeah, I mean, we have an online process, don't we? So you could do a walkthrough of the online process. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, a little talk through of it, because I think one of the things that for our ethics groups, one of the issues with the feature anyway is it's drawn from people. Half the group is from within the institution, half are outside the institution, but they're not necessarily in the subject area that the research is in. You know, they're judging it in terms of ethical, reasonable, approach and benefit to the value to the research beneficiaries and things like that. So they are independent, and so sometimes it's really tough for them to know exactly what you mean because they don't know the context always. So sometimes it is that thing of helping people make that clear in the form. That certainly helps the process. Yeah, things like this are good. Maybe we'll. Is that okay?
I think so.
We'll move through. Do we transition a little bit into questions or further bits and pieces? Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, maybe, for any. I know Trevor's been very good answering questions in the chat as we've gone along, but if anybody's got any further questions, obviously the chat's there and there is the Q&A. I don't think, I'll check, there's no questions in the Q&A. Don't think so. But if anybody's got any further questions, please do ask us.
Yeah. I think that would be, thank folks for that. I'll stop sharing the slides there just as a way to, well, I'll try to anyway. If I press the right buttons, things sometimes change. But yeah, no, folks, thanks. You were great actually interacting with the chat and stuff. And if there are follow-up things, I'd put in a link to the Steam site where it has some of the information on this. But we're just one place. Lots of other institutions, be places from your own context, or sometimes people are maybe part of conversation and you don't think of it as scholarship, teaching and learning or scholarly work. That meeting up online with colleagues, even if it's only once a month and you're chatting about this stuff, it helps so much. It makes a real difference.
I think it's especially in a distance or an online learning situation. I think it can become very isolating. It can, and lots of us have experienced this, particularly since the pandemic. And Fiona alluded to this in her talk. That bringing the communities together is much more difficult, and teaching can be a very lonely profession if you're. And so, reaching out to colleagues and looking without embarrassment at one another's practice. When I was a teacher, I was a school teacher originally, and I remember hating having my classroom door open. There's this feeling that you close the door and you're in there on your own, and that's that. It took a while for me to grow out of that mindset, but observed teaching is so important. And it's often observing the practice of other people that is so developmental. And also feeding back to them about how they can improve, and then looking at them and how they can improve your practice. So this is a virtuous circle, really, and we don't do enough of it.
Yeah. That's good. Marcia had added in the chat there a little bit about how do you treat the sort of inter-institutional collaboration for research and things like that. I was just going to pick up on that a little bit because I think there's a bit of it where every now and again there's an opportunity to get some funding for activities like that. So the European Union, even though the UK's position with it is a tenuous thing at times, we are able to participate in projects through the EU again, which has been a great source of work for us in the past. So sometimes there's ways that we can get funding either nationally or internationally that helps with some of that work. Sometimes it's just informal pieces through networks, so things like Aiken and stuff. We have communities and conferences and stuff that will come together, and actually that informal network I've found really, really rich as well, because there is the project, which can be a focus piece of work, but actually just the community and being part of a wider group and keeping in touch with folks, I think, is a rich source for this as well. So, certainly, I should say the OU would be open for any collaborations. If people are interested in getting in touch with us, do drop us a line. But yeah, if you are interested in working with that, I mean, I know colleagues through the International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, there's an international and there's a European meeting for that, as well as some national groups as well. There's some national groups within the UK. I'm sure there may be things in your own context, but things like that are great ways to collaborate and communicate and stuff. Yeah, it's an element of that, making it public, sharing your work and stuff. And I think we were saying as well about trying to defend it financially. I always try to make the argument that encouraging people to do scholarly teaching improves their work, and getting an engagement in scholarship of teaching and learning, it brings professional practice through in a way that training programs don't quite do the same thing. The training is there, and when you identify a need, you can get trained in a particular thing, but the pull for it sometimes comes from our own curiosity, our own questions that we want to find out. And certainly for colleagues at UU who've been involved in these projects, their learning is for a point of need. These scholarship projects really drive people's engagement and interest and stuff. So I found it, if you like the sort of training budget and sort of professional development budget, scholarship is in that sort of space and helps, I think, with some of these things as well. So.
And we know that it makes such a tremendous difference to colleagues. I've seen people who've been inspired by their scholarship work. They've felt that they don't have a lot of direct agency to change things. They've undertaken a scholarship project and they've found their motivation again. They've come into closer contact with students, with a range of students, not just necessarily the ones that they work with most closely. And it's a very empowering thing to do. So for the individual scholar, it can be a career changing thing to do. It was certainly a career changing thing for me to do, however many years ago it was when I first started doing this. So yeah, I couldn't recommend it more.
I was going to say it hasn't stopped for me, because there's an element of that, of like when we were saying about having a small conference within the university, but we also participate in some of these national ones or other places, and seeing colleagues go along and talk about the work from the university outside of the university, it's transformational. When you see people, they've done their project, they know their subject, they know the stuff that they're doing, but they've only really talked about it within their institution. Once they moved outside and see what other people are doing and see how their work is relevant for other institutions, so empowering. So
they blossom.
For me, I mean, it's that comment about the building subtle in and with other institutions. Actually, sometimes just getting your work out there and being seen by other institutions gives you such a boost, and I think is a real thing for helping validate what we do within the universities, all of our universities.
Yeah, and recognizing that other people want to know what you've got to say. They want to listen to you. They want to hear about your experience of this particular issue, or teaching this particular topic, or teaching this discipline, or using technology enhanced learning in that context. People want to know because they want new ideas. So there's a groundswell of attention that you can pull, and then you can learn so much from others. Yeah,
I think there was one of these books. There was a beautiful foreword for a book recently that I was looking at, where it was saying that we should never try to reduce anything so gloriously complex as education, as learning, because it's infinitely complex. Every context that we have, the environment, the subjects, the topic, everything's changing all the time. So it's never going to be a menu-based approach. It's always contextualized. It's always, and I think that's why we love to teach. It's such a rich thing. So it's hopefully a driver and an incentive for people as well.
I think that's a really good point to close on, actually, Trevor.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to thank Diane and Trevor, for coming along and running this session this afternoon. Certainly, I'm going away inspired. Anyway, it's always just good to hear what's going on. Just a couple of things to remind you. I see that we've got the link up there. As you know, the Eden network and professionals, group within Eden, we do run we run webinars from time to time. There is another one coming up later this month, and it's going to be on the 27th of February. And And Diane mentioned this topic, generative AI, measuring awareness of using generative AI in university studies. So that might be one that would be of interest to you. And beyond that, into March, there is Open Education Week coming up, and Eden will be running a number of events during that. You'll get details of that on the website. And of course, there's a conference coming up in June, as well. So again, if you want further information on any of those things, if you go to the Eden website, you'll find that. And thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And thanks again to our two speakers, Diane and Trevor. And I'll wish you well for the rest of the afternoon stroke evening, depending, morning, wherever you are in the world. And good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Really nice to be here. Goodbye for now.
Bye.